Things have been going well, but two things I did not think about that I should have thought about. One, I'm not a particularly short person. I'm about 5'11" on a good day when I'm wearing tall shoes. But Jeremiah is about 6'5". So I know you can't tell that from Zoom. Two things I did not think about that I should. And so
One,
I'm
if
not
you
a
go
particularly
to
short
not
person.
hearing
I'm about 5 foot. I'm hearing myself back, Dave. Are you hearing
Yeah,
that?
I heard an echo too. I don't
Okay.
know where it came from.
I'm not hearing it anymore. I don't like hearing myself. So that really threw me off. But if you visit our website, well, the first time I visited our website, I that was the moment when I realized just how much taller Jeremiah is than me. So I told him next time I'm standing on a box or a tree stump or something. The second thing, and I will say this one is more important, is if you are a breakfast person, go into business with another breakfast person. So Jeremiah and I travel often, and when we're in new cities, breakfast is my favorite meal of the day. And I want to wake up early, go hit a local breakfast spot. And Jeremiah is a fast until lunch kind of guy. And so he is not motivated to wake up early. And yes, Michelle, your face tells the whole story. So that's bonus content in addition to what we're going to cover today. But and I should I'd be remiss if I didn't say all of that being said, Michelle is it's Jeremiah and I are not a competition. Michelle is the most beautiful, the smartest, the most talented of all of us. So laying all of that to the side.
No, but okay, so the next time we're all on here together, we need to intervene with Jeremiah so he becomes a breakfast person because that's just wrong. That's a deal breaker right
It's
there.
it's a fatal flaw in character.
Yeah.
But it really is. It's a privilege to get to spend this time with you. Dave is just one of those people, as you all know, that when you meet him, just exudes warmth and generosity. And those people are becoming rarer and rarer. And so when Dave said, "Hey, do you guys want to be a part of this thing that I'm doing?" Just the character and just what Dave represents and what Dave exudes and his consistency in that over the years is just something that we're just thrilled to be a part of this group and to get to play a small role in the Fixed Ops Mastermind. So thank you all for having us. Really hope this time together is valuable. It's not lost on me that this is the first Fixed Ops Mastermind after daylight savings time. And so you are probably feeling the effects of it's a little darker outside. I guess if you're on the East Coast, it's already been dark at this time for a while. I'm
Yeah.
Central Time Zone, so we're adjusting. My 4-year-old, as I mentioned the other day, said, "Dad, why is it already bedtime?" And so that's his frame of reference. But so as Dave mentioned, we had slotted today's session to be about communication and one-on-ones, but then really unpacking that and looking at all of the different components of that. And what's just been heavy on my mind and my heart recently in our work with clients, really wanted to laser in micro focus on feedback. So feedback falls within the realm of communication and one-on-ones, but this may expand into a 2 or 3 part series as we evolve out. So knowing that we just have 1 hour together today, really want to focus on feedback. And I am a huge proponent of learning, creating transformation. And the only way that learning creates transformation is if we actually take the information and distill it into practice and put it into action. And so I'm going to ask you all, I'm not going to ask you to share this because this is I want you to go to the most personal place you can with this. I want you to get as real with yourself as possible. So I'm not going to ask you to share this with the rest of the group, but I want you to think of a person in your life, and chances are they slipped into your mind, even if it was just for a couple of seconds, probably in the 30 minutes leading up to this call. That person in your life, maybe it's leadership, maybe it's life at large, maybe it's work, I don't know. You can think of it holistically. That person in your life that you really need to give feedback to. That person who has done something that's offended you is continuing to repeat behavior or show a pattern that is churning your gears. That person that you need to have an honest conversation with them. There's a fracture in the relationship, And if things continue the way that they've been, you know that eventually that road leads to you becoming resentful and bitter. I want you to think of that person. I want you to think through what the scenario is. And I want you to just jot a couple notes on that. Just table that. And we'll work with this as your own personal case study as we go throughout our hour today. I am going to, while you're doing that, I'm going to share a resource in the chat. So this is a one pager that we have. And I will say full transparency, we have a designer that we have create these materials for us. And she created a print version. So it's got the little like print crop margins on there. And I am not a designer. I don't know how to remove those. So this is a print asset we've had traditionally that I'm now sharing in a digital format, but it's still a powerful asset nonetheless, and will frame a lot of our conversation today. So go ahead and download that. And Dave, feel free to share that with anybody. That's a resource we just want to make available to people. Okay. Does everybody have one? At least one person? Maybe you're like, I just thought of 5 people in my life. But does everybody have at least one? Yeah? Okay, good. All right. Well, let's talk about feedback. So feedback is incredibly powerful topic. I would say most of the problems that plague organizations and most of the problems that we face in our life are out of a lack of anybody stepping into that situation and bringing honest feedback to the other individual. And then there's the old adage where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And so we tend to believe, oh, there's a little bit of smoke, but if I ignore the smoke long enough, it'll go away on its own. And rarely does it ever go away on its own. Eventually, usually it turns into a blaze and begins to burn things around us. And then we step into firefighter mode. The most common metaphor I hear when I'm coaching leaders and when I'm working with organizations, the most common metaphor I hear them use to describe leadership is that leadership feels like fighting fires, that they feel like they spend all of their day putting out fires. And I don't want to dismiss that. I don't want to say that that's not true, because the rate of change, the rate of speed in which business is being done these days does necessitate that sometimes things just catch on fire. And fires aren't always preventable. Sometimes they pop up and you've got to deal with them. And so while I don't want to be dismissive of that, I don't want to pretend like fires should never pop up, or if they do pop up that you're being an ineffective leader. I also want to say that a lot of fires that end up popping up could have been prevented at the outset. And part of the reason why you're spending a good chunk of your time fighting fires is because you didn't do the work up front of fire prevention, right? And feedback is a form of fire prevention. So feedback is a form of going around and spraying whatever you spray to prevent the fire from actually taking root in the first place. Or the electrical wires that are just hanging on by a thread. And if they just touch each other in the exact wrong way, it's going to end up sparking a fire. And that person, that relationship, that situation in your life that you think this can turn into a fire at any moment. And what I really hope from our conversation today is that you leave here feeling equipped, empowered, and confident to step into that situation and have that conversation. And we're going to give you all of the tools I believe that you need to be able to have that conversation very effectively. So let's dive into the PowerPoint, because I really want to take us into a place where I get to hear from you. I do have a tendency to talk a lot, especially in trainings, because I love this so much. But I'm going to do my best to shut up and get to hear from you all. But before we do that, I want to start with this quote by Jeff Christian, that receiving and providing feedback is an essential ingredient in achieving a lifetime full of growth and opportunity. And the part of that definition I really want to hone in on is that feedback, for it to be maximally effective in your life, has to be a two-way street. You likely can think of somebody that's really good, or they believe they're really good at giving feedback, meaning their comfortability and the quantity of feedback that they give far outpaces and exceeds their willingness to receive feedback themselves. And the quality of your feedback, the quality of your ability to give feedback that actually is received by the other person, is directly proportional to the quality with which you receive feedback. In fact, I would say if there's one that you can pick of the two, try to be even better at receiving feedback than you are at giving feedback. And this will lead to a lifetime of growth and opportunity for yourself and for others. So, where I want to hear from you all is specifically what comes to your minds when you hear the word feedback. And I love to be as relational as possible. Virtual is unbelievable in the sense that we're all getting to connect from different time zones and all across the United States is just unbelievable. And I'm so thankful for technology. But I do always desperately wish that I could just be there in person with each one of you. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to have the PowerPoint pulled up when I need to, but I want to see your faces as much as possible. So, what comes to mind when you hear the word feedback?
Useful information.
Useful information, Russell?
Yes.
Tell me more about that. What makes feedback useful?
I'm open. An alternate word would be constructive criticism, but feedback on something that somebody heard, saw, and I'm always learning. So I usually absorb it really well. There are some times if you catch me at a moment where it's not really a good time for any kind of feedback, but I won't respond. I'll process it and respond later with hellfire and damnation. Okay. No. Usually it represents a learning opportunity. When feedback, that's what it means to me.
Yeah. Well said, Russell. And you touched on a critical component, which is the timing of the feedback, right? That's something so I mentioned I have a 4-year-old. Being a father is a huge part of my life. So I have a 4-year-old son, but I also have a 6-year-old daughter. And through this journey, my wife has taught me when they just bonked their head or they're just in the middle of a meltdown, that is not the time to offer them feedback of what they could have done to prevent that in the first place, which is my natural instinct of, well, you wouldn't have bonked your head if you wouldn't have been jumping off the couch like I told you to.
Yeah.
And my wife constantly reminds me, comfort, soothe, feedback later, right?
Yeah, they're not in a receiving mode at that time.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, it's a great call out, Russell. What else comes to the surface when you hear the word feedback?
I will say, Wes, for me, feedback for years had an extremely negative connotation because that's what it was in the company that I work for. I was like, oh, can I give you some feedback? And it's like, oh, here it comes, right? What did I do wrong now? Because it was always so negative, and then I would relate that.
Yep.
And I've had to work myself out of that. And still there are times where when somebody's like, oh, can I give you some feedback? And I'm like, no.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know what's coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great call out, Gretchen. I once worked for a leader. I believe one of the previous sessions that Jeremiah and Michelle led was on growth versus fixed mindset. And very useful concepts, very important to have a growth mindset. But I had a leader that anytime I had objections to anything, that was used against me of, well, you just don't have a growth mindset. And it was, no, there's actual good reasons why I'm hesitant about this idea or pursuing this opportunity outside of having a growth versus a fixed mindset. So yeah, it's feedback can carry a really negative stigma and a really negative connotation because it can be used by people in power specifically, I would say, to push forward their agenda that's ultimately not for you. And trust is definitely a huge component of that. Kyle, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I think feedback provides opportunity.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Tell me about that word opportunity.
Well, I think it's opportunity for growth, depending on who the feedback's coming from. It's feedback is an opportunity to be able to get a read on somebody and determine whether that feedback is trustworthy or not. I mean, there's a variable of things that can come from it, but I think ultimately it's definitely opportunity to learn one way or another, and what you do with it is really up to you. Take the good, take the bad, or find the pieces of the feedback that can help you get to the next spot, or realize that the person that's giving you feedback maybe not the person that should be giving you the feedback, if you will. But so I guess it could go either way.
Yeah, it's great, Kyle. Yeah, Michelle, hop in.
Okay, what Kyle just said is such a cool curiosity. When Gretchen, I'm just like, I mean, I still, when I hear feedback immediately, I go, but in coaching, we're trained, be curious. When anything comes up, just be curious. And so, Kyle, you just really illustrated that on a fact of when I'm receiving feedback, I need to breathe and be curious about, is this the kind of person that I need to hear from? If Wes says, can I give you some feedback? I'm like, let's go,
Mhm.
because he's wanting me to grow. There's other people that I can be like, what are you up to? And just take a curiosity mindset.
Mhm.
And I think that's awesome. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle.
I always looked at it as if it was coming from below, I was really interested.
Uh-huh.
If it was coming from
Yeah.
above, it was, yeah. Let's just say it wasn't positive.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's some power dynamics at play with feedback that definitely changes the landscape. And how many of you, I'm curious on this call, and I've used the word leader several times throughout this conversation. Please know that I use leader as a very inclusive term, meaning if you're on this call, if you're taking time out of your evening to be here to invest in yourself, you're a leader. Full stop. I don't care if you have direct reports. None of that matters to me. You're on this call. That's evidence that you're a leader. And so when I use that term leader, I'm using it very inclusively. Now, I do want to ask this question. How many of you at work have people that you supervise, that you're responsible for supervising their performance? Okay. Yeah. So if you,
Not today.
yeah.
Back a few years, yeah. Today
Yeah.
I'm retired supervising myself, which I will say is a full-time damn job, let me tell you.
That's right. Yeah.
Because I am totally irresponsible.
Even on the first day I started my own company, a really good friend of mine sent me a comic strip that said, I quit my job and started my own company because I hated my boss. Now I just hate myself." And so that's very true too, right? We can, which is important in the context of this conversation. And on a serious note, we need to be better about giving ourselves feedback, right? We're our own feedback loop and our own internal critic. And so that's also part of today's conversation is, are you giving yourself quality feedback, or are you just guilting yourself, shaming yourself, creating narratives that actually create stuck energy and don't help you learn, move forward and grow, just put you down? It's an important part of the conversation. Yep, Gretchen says, consider the source. Absolutely consider the source. Absolutely. Not all feedback is created equal. Yeah. Good
And
deal.
not all
Makes me
feedback,
think of
feedback is
specific
not-
time. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, the term feedback is, I don't know, it's difficult to define in the sense that it's used so many different ways,
Sure.
different things, many of which you individually might not think of as feedback.
Sure.
If your definition of it, when you first said it, it was sort of, all right, well, my definition is X, but there are several other definitions of it that you get depending on who you talk to. So
It's a great point, Stephen. And other Stephen, did you have something to chime in with?
Yeah, I thought of two things. One, and this one's probably not super positive, but my ex-mother-in-law used to have a saying, this isn't a criticism, it's a critique. Didn't really feel like that, but that was her way to give feedback. And then I was thinking about, I had a boss, worked for Carfax for a really long time, had a couple different roles, and one, I loved the role, but my boss I did not get along well with. And it was interesting. I was a trainer, so I would be sent out by Carfax to be like the face and go pitch and do stuff. And I was at a Toyota CPO meeting in Houston, and the head of Toyota CPO was there. I was giving a presentation, and one of the dealers was, I know this might surprise everyone on the phone, but he wasn't super excited about Carfax in general. And so he had a particular issue with something, and I verbalized, I just reiterated what the Carfax stance was. and I didn't feel it was contentious or anything. And I just was right.
Mhm.
And like 3 weeks later, we're at a corporate meeting, and my boss, who again, anything he said, I didn't like him, so it automatically and he gave me feedback, and it was an interesting because it was really very good, and I took it, and it was the first time I ever kind of like, even though to somebody's point, think of the messenger, he actually had a good message, and his point was, it got back to actually the head of the CPO wasn't there. It
Mhm.
got back to him that this guy was upset about Carfax, and in his brain, it was confrontational. And I was like, and I told my boss exactly what he said, and he said, "Well, Stephen, I believe you because you're a nice person, and I can't imagine you getting confrontational with anybody. But just so you know, now the head of Toyota CPO thinks you got confrontational. Whether that's real or not,
Yep.
that is, and it really was something that." It was a really good feedback from somebody I didn't really care for, but it was like, oh. And it taught me a good lesson about receiving feedback that, yes, even though sometimes it's negative and the person you may not like, if you can take a step back, I think you kind of touched on this, like, and listen for what is in there. There's something you can take. It also kind of reminds me of a guy that I was good friends with younger in life. His daughter went to a very conservative Christian college. He went to go visit her. They went to church, and the church they went to, he was not a fan of the message from the pastor. And he said something again, kind of similar. He said, all I kept thinking at first, I was not paying attention. And then I started thinking, well, I'm here for a reason. We're all here for whatever that in that moment, there's something I can take away, even though maybe I don't like the guy who's talking, maybe his message is not the message I normally would hear, but there's something here. And so that really spoke to me. And I think of that when I'm taking feedback and giving it, right? It's trying to think like, how do you meet that person where they are in your message? And, yes, feedback can be bad, but it also can be good.
Yeah.
If you're taking it in the right direction.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was a lot of stuff.
Wes, just to tag super quick. So, Stephen, I want to pull out one word from there. You use the word critique. I'd rather have someone tell me, do you mind if I give you a critique like of your performance for a presentation than say, would you like some feedback? Because at least a critique, I feel as though, oh, you're going to give me something constructive that I did that I can improve upon. So even that one word change from feedback to critique, I'd be like, yes, critique me. I ask people that all the time. What can I do better? But that one word change. Oh, and Stephen, your t-shirt says dog, cars, and one more thing, and then I'll coffee.
Coffee. Thank you. Let's go.
We just became best friends, and you don't
You
even
can
know
all
it.
go buy your own shirt
All right.
or mug or sweatshirt or hat at dogscarscoffee.com. Dave has one.
I love it. That's great. And Stephen, I will point out, my ex-mother-in-law is an all-time sentence starter. I mean, you can just end the sentence there, and I know whatever's coming next is probably not going to be positive. So that's excellent work there. And Stephen, you also segued us really nicely into the next slide. So Michelle, please Venmo Stephen his
I
$5 for
will.
his cup of coffee. Yeah.
I will.
So what you all are reflecting on, and all of you did this, right? What you all are reflecting on is the power that communication is not just communication, right? That we tend to believe that communication is one party transmits a message and the other party receives the message. But there's all of this middle space between transmission and receiving, right? There's all of this noise that occupies that space. And the noise could be past experiences. So Gretchen just reflected, I would rather somebody tell me they're critiquing me than offer to give me feedback. I guarantee you there's other people on this call that word. In fact, Stephen, you actually just referenced that because of your experience with your mother-in-law, your ex-mother-in-law, I'm sorry, that critique, that actually carries a different connotation for you. The physiological response, right, that's set off when you hear that word, that puts you into an elevated defensive state. Whereas for Gretchen, because of her past experience, that actually lowers her physiological state, whereas the word feedback has the same response for her. And so there's all of these things that are happening when we're in the process of communicating between two human beings. Because
Do you
human
think on
yeah,
that, does
go
it
ahead.
make sense if you're managing someone when you're starting out the relationship, finding that
Yeah.
out? Is there a good way to communicate that? Like, how do you want to receive it?
That's a great question. Yeah, how do you like to receive feedback? So when I notice, and you can even frame it. So a part of how I see my responsibility as your leader, I'm invested in your growth and development. And the reason I'm invested in your growth and development is because I want you to succeed. I want you to thrive. And I want that to be true while you're here. And I even want that to be true after you leave here. And being in the role of supervisor, I may get to see some things and hear some things that gives me a different perspective. And I'd love to be able to offer you feedback that you can take. And a phrase that I really like, and I didn't invent the phrase, so please take it. And you may have a different phrase that's similar, but chew on the meat and spit out the bone, right? And so you can even frame it that way of, hey, I'm going to offer you some feedback. This is based on my interpretation. And I promise I'm going to give you a framework for giving feedback. So this will make even more sense later. But I'm going to give you some feedback. Take what's useful, chew on the meat, but I'll probably throw a few bones in there that won't be super useful to you, and maybe my interpretation of events that may not actually be accurate. And so feel free to take the feedback that's not useful and set it off to the side. And don't feel like you have to do anything with that specifically. Now, that's a general performance feedback. When we're talking about performance, like putting somebody on a performance improvement plan, a PIP, that's a different conversation, right? And so there are different levels to feedback as well. There's feedback of, hey, this is for your growth and development. And then there's feedback of, if you want to keep your job, I need to see X, Y, Z. And the feedback conversations take the whole same form. I think the same model that we'll show you today applies in both situations, but your tonality and how you communicate, is this just feedback that I'm just offering for you to be useful? Or is this feedback of, if you don't implement this, then we're going to have to put you on a performance improvement plan, or it'll lead to a next write-up. And those are different types of conversations for sure. Great question. So to frame this really quickly, and this is awesome. I love the conversation. This is really, really useful. Slides are always secondary to conversation, but I do think this will be helpful. So when we are interpreting event, and whether we're interpreting that event of something somebody else did, or something we did, or somebody else is watching something we did, which that's a part of the conversation today too, is when we receive feedback, being able for ourselves to have the discernment, as Gretchen and Stephen and Michelle were reflecting on throughout this, and the other Stephen was reflecting on throughout this conversation, of being able to see, where is this feedback really coming from? So when we think of communication, or when we think of feedback in particular, I want you to think through these 4 steps. So we all go through these 4 steps in different forms. We see and hear something that occurs. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we hear it, sometimes both, right? We see and hear something that occurs. Then we tell ourselves a story. Our minds are meaning makers. So I didn't mention this, but I'm an organizational psychologist. So I'm endlessly fascinated with what is the brain actually doing in these situations. And the brain interprets situations and makes sense of those in different ways, right? So if you were bit by a dog at a young age, you may see a dog and interpret that as a threat. If you had a family pet named Rufus that slept in your bed every night from the time you were 2 years old until you were 16 years old, you have a different response, even though you're both looking at the same dog, because you have a history, you have a background. Your mind has gone through this process, and the brain is amazing. Your mind has gone through this process of building different models, building different codes, that the primary purpose is to keep you safe in this world. And so depending on your past experiences, specifically ones that felt really threatening, whether that was threatening physically or threatening emotionally or relationally, your brain will really anchor really strongly to those and will tell a story and will interpret events. And 2 people can look at the exact same occurrence and arrive at very different conclusions based on their past experience. So we go through this process telling a story. Then we feel. Then our body actually has a response. And all of this is happening, milliseconds, right? Then we feel, our body takes the interpretation and gives physiological cues to it. And that actually happens somewhat simultaneously. It's not, these two things kind of occur all at once. It's unbelievable. And then we act, then we decide how to act. And in most cases, generally, especially in performance feedback situations, we're going to sit on that information. And we're often going to ruminate about it. I mean, when I asked you to think of that feedback instance, you may be thinking of something that happened 9 months ago. We're ruminating about it. We're thinking about it, or maybe it happened yesterday. We're thinking about it and we're deciding how to act, and not acting is an action in itself. But I really want to anchor into this, tell a story. This is the most critical piece. If you can capture, and when we get to the feedback model here in a moment, if you can capture for yourself and separate what you saw, what you heard, from how your brain made sense of what you saw and what you heard, the quality of your feedback will improve exponentially. Because while our brains are meaning-making machines, in real time, they can also lie to us. They can also see things from a specific vantage point based on our experience, based on our values, based on our personality. They can see things from a specific vantage point, and then they formulate a story about those things. And so what I'd love for you to do is that little example that you jotted down on your notepad at the beginning of this conversation. I just want you non-judgmentally, not judging yourself whatsoever, creating compassionate space for yourself. I want you to write out in as much detail as you can, or just a few bullet points is fine too. What's the story you're telling yourself about that person and about that situation? Non-judgmentally. You have reasons for feeling that, right? So this is what happens. There's generally two different kinds of people. Tell me if you've ever heard that before. Generally two different kinds of people. There's the kinds of people that are so confident in themselves and their brain's logic making that they anchor into that story. I mean, you dig roots. The first thing that pops into your mind, your first interpretation of events, you are an attorney questioning a stand on the witness. You are going to interrogate the heck out of that other person, the heck out of that other story, from the conviction that your first interpretation was right. That's some of you in this room. That's me. Then there's another group in this call, the other kind of people, that you discount and discredit everything that you think. You begin to dismiss it. I had a coaching client earlier today. That's one of the things that we're working on. He's not leading with enough confidence. He's not leading with enough assertiveness, because every time he starts to step into an event, he convinces himself of all of the reasons why he's wrong. And in some sense, that's really commendable, right? It's really a huge skill to be able to rethink things. On the other hand, it prevents him from taking action and prevents him from stepping into the authority he needs to step into for his team's successfulness. And so as you're writing down, what is the story you're telling yourself about that person, about the situation, just do it non-judgmentally. Don't anchor down into that story, and don't dismiss the story. Just accept it. Of your brain is making sense of this event, the way it's making sense of this event, and your brain has a reason for doing so. Right, let's take a couple moments there. Okay. So now, as we're observing our stories, the stories that we're telling ourselves about that person and the event, now we want to begin doing the really critical work of preparing to give that person feedback from the standpoint of being able to separate facts from stories. So facts, and I'll say this for a moment. Facts are about the actual occurrence. What specifically occurred? What was the sequence of events? What specifically did you hear? Stories are judgments, right? What's your interpretation of those things? What are you telling yourself about the other person? So there's this really fun thing that I'll nerd out on it for a second, and then I would encourage you to look it up later, called the fundamental attribution error. And psychologists have studied this. It's been replicated hundreds of times. That is consistently our tendency to, when other people do things, we assign character value to their actions. When we do things, we create stories of why that's not a reflection of our character, but a reflection of the circumstances surrounding us. So an employee shows up late to work. The fundamental attribution error would suggest that in most cases, we're saying they're lazy, they don't have respect for time, they don't know how to manage their time, they don't care about this job, they don't care about me, they don't understand the importance of being here on time and what that means for our team, for our clients. We show up late to work, we immediately jump into the story. And part of this is our intimacy with knowing exactly what happened. But we thought, hey, my kid was having a rough morning. It was tough to get them dressed. That train stopped me at the tracks right on my way in. If I would have been there 2 minutes earlier, I would have been here 5 minutes early and not late. I made the coffee and the coffee pot overfilled. I didn't put the filter in the right way, right? And we begin to give ourselves these reasons of why we're late that aren't a reflection of our character. But then when we interpret others' events, we tend to actually jump into judgments about their character and not the set of circumstances. So actual occurrence versus judgments. What we actually observed versus the conclusions that we drew, right? Facts is what we can observe. Stories are the conclusions that we've drawn. And I will tell you, it's really hard on the surface to separate these things out organically, which is why sometimes, specifically for really critical feedback, you actually need to sit down and write it out and prepare it as if you're going to deliver it and rehearse it and even catch yourself of, oh, do I actually know that? Is that actually reflecting what happened? Or is that a character assignment and judgment that I've made? Is that a conclusion I've drawn to without sufficient facts? And then facts can be measured. Stories are about attributions, right? So facts, things that you could catch on camera. I played football through college, and one of the more humbling things about football is that they say the eye in the sky doesn't lie. And so we'd come off the field and we'd be watching tape on Monday morning, a recording of the game. And coach would say, Martin, did you give 100% effort on every play? Yeah, coach, 100% effort on every play. Second play of the game, plays it forward. Hey, it looks like you're jogging here after the ball carrier instead of sprinting. Guess I didn't give 100% effort on every play, coach, right? And so really taking that critical of a lens too, of is this something that actually could be captured on camera, could be captured on tape, or is this an interpretation of the events? What's coming up for you all as you're thinking through maybe your specific scenario, the stories you're telling yourself, and separating facts from stories?
We judge ourselves on our intentions and others on their actions, or vice versa. So, we don't really know what the backstory is to what happened to them, but we do know our own backstory. So we put intention into that evaluation and judgment of ourselves, whereas we don't do that for others because we don't know what it is. But then your brain automatically fills in blank spaces because brains don't like blank spaces. It doesn't have to be the truth. It just has to be something that fits in the space.
That's it.
We're good. Okay, now we can go on with the thought. So the combination of those two things tends to lead to what you're talking about, where, you immediately, it's funny, your people are very judgmental of others very, very quickly. Like within 30 seconds, you're already judging somebody, even if you've never spoken to them, all you did was see them. And those kind of habits are hard to break. You get into that mode and you go, oh, they look strange, or they're this, or they're that. And then you start to attribute a whole bunch of stuff to them that has nothing to do with them. You don't know them at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, that's what came to mind.
Yeah. And Stephen, beautiful reflection. And what I would really double down on and underscore for you in that reflection and for everybody is holding that space again. And I've mentioned this, but I want you to hear me on this. Holding that space that your brain has reasons for jumping to those conclusions and forming those stories and filling in those blanks. and we all do it, right? And so the key actually to be able to move forward and focus on facts versus stories is that first step that I offered, which is acknowledging the story without judgment. Acknowledging the story without judgment. We all have different biases. We all have different prejudices. And those things, I like I said, I talk about my kids too much, but my kids did not come into the world holding preconceived notions, but already at 6 and 4, they've begun to fill in the gaps for themselves, right? And they're not conscious agents at this point in their life, choosing which stories to acknowledge and which stories to hold as true and which stories to hold as false. They're too young. And us, right, in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, we're shaped by those early life experiences in those same ways. And so to acknowledge the story you're telling yourself without judgment actually allows you to detach from that story. But when you create judgment around it, when you're harsh to yourself about those things, it actually prevents you from detaching from the story and moving forward. So really critical first step. What else is coming to the surface as you're thinking of telling yourself a story? Yeah, Stephen, please.
I will tell you that raising kids is great leadership training. Honest to God, it is great leadership training.
Oh, it's brutal.
Because they do what you do. They don't do what you say. They realize very, very quickly that if mom does this or dad does this and it's an action, that carries a lot more weight than if dad's just telling you how to fix something, because that's dad's natural go-to is, okay, let me show you how to fix it.
That's right.
But that has nowhere near the impact of any action you take. So it's just, the fact you mention your kid, I think, is very real in terms of its relationship to leadership, because there's no better practice. There's really no better practice. And there's no more humbling experience either. I will tell you that.
Well, and I'll tell you to acknowledge, and I know Stephen had to hop off, but his dog shirt. We have a 4-month-old golden retriever. I think she might be my most difficult child yet. My kids, when they were babies, you could set them in their crib and you didn't have to worry about anything. This one's tearing up my backyard, chewing my furniture.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I may be convinced that raising a dog is tougher than raising a child, at least to this point now. And my kids aren't teenagers yet, so I've got those years ahead of me. But.
Time for a visit from the dog whisperer, I think.
my wife's begging for us to send her to obedience training, and I don't like spending money, so I'm not totally there.
Well,
yet.
Depending on how big the dog is, if it's a big dog, you better spend the money.
Yeah.
Because the destructive power down the road of an untrained dog is almost equal to an untrained teenager who just runs amok. So
there's some
I
really
think I saw a sign the other day. It was funny. The sign, actually on a vet's thing, it said, "Dogs train us for babies. Cats train us for teenagers."
That's funny. Well,
Very true.
Good feedback from Stephen.
Yeah.
All right, friends, I really want to share this with you because you'll see it on your one sheeter, and this truthfully, and one of our core values at Grovity is simplicity. And as simple as this model is, this really does have the power to change your life. I truly do believe that. So this comes from our friends at the Center for Creative Leadership. They're the architects of this model, but this is their formula for giving feedback. So it's called the SBI plus R model. And so the SBI plus R model reflects that when you're giving feedback, you should do it through this 4-step sequence. You should reflect on the situation, anchor specifically to the time and place. Remember, going back to facts versus stories, anchor into the specific details. So what you saw, what you heard, right? Just as simple as that. The situation, in fact, is a place where you should spend very little time offering feedback. It should be cut and dry, about 20 seconds or less. Hey, Dave, this is what happens. This was the event, or this is what I heard. This is what I saw. This was the specifics. Then you go into the behavior. So this was the situation, the time and place. This is what actually transpired. This is what you did. Then moving on to impact. Now, this is where things get dicey, and this is what separates people from who are excellent at giving feedback from people who are awful at giving feedback. Impact reflects the real tangible impact that it had. So Stephen hopped off of this call, but he reflected on an experience where the client, when he was representing Carfax, the client interpreted his events as being confrontational, he said. And so that was when his boss, even though he said, I didn't really respect my boss, but actually the feedback was valuable, is because his boss, whether knowingly or unknowingly, reflected to Stephen, this was the real impact to the client. This was the way that it affected our relationship with this key account. This was the impact to the client. Now, I will say, one of the things that modest leaders and humble leaders often don't do is they don't talk about the impacts it had on them. And it is entirely appropriate and, in fact, very beneficial for your relationship with that person that you, if the event had a direct impact on you, that you step into that conversation with vulnerability and say, Dave, last Tuesday, when we were meeting with that client, you made this joke. That put us in a really tough position. And not even getting into intent. And my brain, even though I teach this, my brain automatically wants to go into jumping into intent. And so intent would be things like, I know you were trying to diffuse the situation with humor. I know you were trying to connect with them. Now I'm in the story, right? Now I'm stuck in my assumption about what Dave was attempting to accomplish. And the chances are, because I'm not Dave, I'm going to get that point wrong. And in that moment, just in it, I'm being as human as possible. I'm trying to connect with him if that's what I would be thinking in that situation. In that moment, I can derail the whole conversation. Because Dave, what does Dave do? Dave immediately goes, that's not what I was trying to do. That wasn't it at all. No, you don't understand. So we were out in the hall and we were having this conversation. And so when I made that joke, I was referencing this earlier conversation that you weren't even, you always do this. You always jump to these conclusions, right? And in that moment, although I'm trying to connect with Dave as a human being, because I introduced intent into the conversation, because I let the story I was telling myself about Dave's behavior enter into the conversation, the whole conversation's derailed. And so I'm not focusing on Dave's intent. I'm saying, when you made that joke with that client last week, that put me in a tough position. I observed that their body language shifted, and it just made it difficult on me. Recommendation: in the future, will you not tell jokes in meetings like this? In the future, will you not talk about XYZ when we're engaged with clients? Great conversation for us to have in my office. You know, I think you're hilarious. Not the right time and place to introduce that joke in the conversation in front of the client. Recommendation for next steps moving forward. So going back to your specific example, what you're thinking through right now, and you wrote down maybe some notes about the story you're telling yourself, begin to parse that out. Begin to really think through what was the specific situation, time, place, as specific as possible. Now, we don't have much time left. This conversation could go a million different directions if it's something you heard through somebody else, which sometimes you do have to give feedback based on hearsay, and just being really mindful that you're operating based on hearsay. And depending on the person that gave the feedback to you, sometimes hearsay is the final word anyways, right? If the president of the company comes in and says, hey, Stephen did this, I don't like it. It doesn't matter if Stephen actually did that. It doesn't matter that it's just hearsay. The president of the company, and as my responsibility to Stephen, I need to make Stephen aware, hey, this trickled. The president is aware of it. She's not happy about it, right? And so that gets into a different conversation. But begin to parse out for yourself, when you think through that conversation you need to have, the feedback you specifically need to give to that person in your life. What's the situation? What's the observable behavior, not your interpretation of the behavior? What's the impact that it had objectively on the set of circumstances or on others, or the impact it had on yourself, or all of the above? What was the impact of that action on you? And then what would you like to see from that person moving forward? Michelle and I have a mutual friend named Steven, actually, and Steven Menzel, and a really wonderful guy.
Yes.
But Steven talks about he was raised by a highway patrolman. Steven, out of high school, went into the Air Force and begun immediately parenting his children in that style. And he reflects on this story of his children are grown now, but when his daughter was 6 years old, he went into her bedroom about 8 different times and said, "Hey, your bedroom's not clean. I told you to clean your bedroom." And they go through this cycle over and over and over. And then finally, on the 8th time, and the way Steven tells it is this moment changed his life. His daughter, 8 years old or so at the time, young girl, burst into tears and said, "Daddy, I know what you don't want. I don't know what you want." And so don't skip that recommendation section, right? So if you're telling somebody, "Hey, you've been doing these things, this is the impact you're having," you need to be prepared to offer them a desired behavior for them to do the next time. Offer them a recommendation moving forward. And you can invite them. I know you all have talked about coaching. You can invite them to design that for themselves as well. So you can say, "Hey, here's a recommendation I have. What do you think you would like to do in that next situation?" But at least have the conversation of, if we're erasing this, what are we putting in its place?
Mhm.
Michelle, I know you have thoughts.
Well, the thing that I love about the examples, when you look down at the examples, there's one that's kind of a tough conversation, but then there's also one, that second one is an opportunity for recognition. So as you're calling that out, I want you to think, a friend of mine always talks about recognition going 3 levels deep. And I have not seen this equation, and this equation is beautiful because you don't go up and say, "Hey, Joe, good job," and walk off, because he'd be like, "Oh, for what? What,
Mhm.
what did I do?" But when you're like, "Joe, man, yesterday you came in and you met with that difficult customer, and I got to sit back and watch it. And because of that, you were so calm and you were so cool that their temperature went down. And because of that, we were able to get them into the service department, get their car taken care of, and they're bringing their other cars back." So that's taking it 3 levels deep and showing, the next time, Joe will remember, "I was calm. They came back." And it's when you recognize something, it's repeated. So this is just another type of feedback to be able to carry that in.
Yeah, I want to add, we take that to a 4th level, right? So what is the setting? What's the behavior that created the feedback, the positive feedback? What are the gifts that they bring, right, to that event? And then what's their impact? The SBGI. I just learned myself. So it really does work when you think about it in the framework of that, giving praise or gratitude for something done well. It's a great framework, especially when you can describe the setting, the unique environment, what the behavior that created that environment, what unique skills or gifts that they brought to it, and what the impact that it had. It's powerful.
Yeah.
That's right. And Joe, you just touched on this, but you all have this one sheet or this handout. Feel free to use this however you'd like. But Joe, you just emphasized, and Michelle as well, focus on strengths in a 7-to-1 ratio. So part of the reason why Gretchen has the relationship with feedback that she has, and part of the reason why, and I'm interpreting events, so feel free to correct me, but why that word critique maybe even sounds more appealing is because at least when they say critique, I know what's coming next. At least
Yeah.
I'm confident about what the conversation is actually going to entail, and I'm not going to get surprised. And to that end, we could be on here for 8 hours. but please let the whole sandwich feedback thing of tell a positive, then a negative, then a positive. Let's just get rid of that entirely. Feedback, in my interpretation and my belief, needs to be one at a time. So I'm having this feedback conversation. I'm not hedging my bets. I'm not softening the feedback. I'm offering the feedback. Then maybe tomorrow, the next day is a different feedback conversation. But exactly what Michelle and Joe just recommended. Try to give positive feedback at least 7 times for every negative or constructive feedback that you give.
Just be
Yeah, what does
careful
Brene
who
Brown
you-
say? She says, clear is kind.
Clear is kind.
Right, right. Isn't that the quote? I think it's
That's it.
something similar to that.
That's
So
Be careful where it's always positive to lead in, and then it becomes negative.
That's right.
Then people are gonna hear your positive comment as, oh crap, what's
What's
coming
coming?
now?
Exactly.
So just, if you're gonna do it, but don't do it as a way to open the conversation that's gonna be negative, because you don't want to start out with a negative or something. I mean, don't do that, because people will interpret it differently.
That's right.
Stephen, that hits on the magic words that you're supposed to remove from any conversation. You're supposed to remove but, just, they, and however. Because anytime you say something nice, then you go, but that erases everything. And however is just the Ivy League version of that.
I'll tell you, my wife, when you were talking about cleaning the room,
Uh-huh.
my wife's solution to that was, I thought, brilliant, because she'd tell the kids, all right, go up, clean your rooms. And then they'd come back down and she'd say, okay, are the rooms clean? And they go, oh yeah, no, they're clean. They're clean. And she goes, if I go upstairs, will I be happy? And they go, hold on a minute. And they all run back upstairs again.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I
She
just-
actually
I just learned to
never-
shut the door.
Never went up to check, but that was a great line.
Well, friends, I don't have anywhere to be. I've got all the time in the world. But Dave, I want to make sure to pass the floor to you if you have any closing thoughts or wrap up, since we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you so much, Wes. Kyle is actually going to close us out for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Grateful for your time, Wes and Michelle. Another very impactful night. I took a couple of pages of notes over here. Kyle, all yours, brother.
As always, yeah. Thank you guys so much. It's always fun when you guys are on. And Dave, thank you for always having great guests on for us to be able to gain more education and be better at what we do, for sure. So Thursday we have We Are, one of our favorite shows, and one of my favorite people is hosting, Kaylee Filio, talking about marketing and the use of your personal brand. So make sure you are there. Just a reminder, we always ask that if you're coming on to Fixed Ops Mastermind and you're gaining all this knowledge, try and bring somebody with you, because the more that we have with us, the better all we perform. So if we get together, we can be great together. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Awesome. Thank you all. So
Good night.
great to meet all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wes and Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dave. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.